I'm here on behalf of ASTM. I don't work for ASTM. It's an organization that's been in business for over 100 years. We have about 30,000 volunteers that put their time and their expertise and efforts into creating standards in a variety of industries and technologies. ASTM has been involved with aviation standards for a long time. I couldn't even tell you when it started. Oops. So what I'm going to try to cover in my 20 minutes is a little bit of background about ASTM. How do I get this display here large, just so I can read it here, so I turn it around. Oh, there you go. Okay.
We spared no expense.
Just lost situational awareness here. So I'll talk about ASTM as an organization, a little bit about aviation standards. I'll talk specifically about the F38 committee that I've been involved with, and has been involved in aviation or UAS standards for several years. And then the focus on small UAS, and then some of the global acceptance challenges for getting this technology, or the standards and the guidance and the specifications out there for everybody to be able to use. ASTM has produced about 12,000 standards in a variety of industries that are out for publication or for use. Everything from standard size and gauges of electrical outlet sockets. The first standard that ASTM created was in 1898 on the construction or the manufacturing of rails for railroads, and a series of incidents of derailments because of poor construction or poor design of the rails. So that was the first standard they came up with. It goes across borders, across disciplines, across all kinds of manufacturing materials, medical devices, things like cameras, even in some phases of computers and technology. So it's a constantly evolving effort from the organization to try to stay up with what's going on in industry and in manufacturing and all phases of technology. It depends entirely upon volunteer work. I put a lot of time into ASTM volunteer. It's something that's available to any of you. Part of the ASTM effort is one piece of what Nancy was talking about is the engagement piece of making standards and regulations and specifications work for unmanned aircraft. If you want to be engaged, if you want to have an immediate impact on the future of your business and on the outcome of some of these standards and the regulations that are in development, join ASTM and become part of the conversation. All it costs is $75 to join. You can then join pretty much any committee that's on ASTM, whether it's F38 or other areas of expertise that you may be able to share with your colleagues. As I said, we rely upon the expertise of the participants and the members. Try to collect people into the work groups and into the standards groups that can bring technical expertise or background through either experience or academic teaching or development of systems or products that they can bring their experiences to the table and share what they think would be the best standards, the best practice, the best specifications for a particular element of what it is that's being regulated. The standards are global, international. The goal is to develop a standards body in what particular technology is being dealt with that applies not just in the U.S. but around the world globally and can be harmonized with, in the aviation world, civil aviation authorities anywhere. We're going backwards here. Nope. This is the spectrum of aviation standards and regulations, sort of a continuum from the left side where a type of aircraft could be completely exempted from regulatory oversight and regulatory treatment. So kites and model airplanes, for example, are specifically exempted. As you move to the right, you get the other extreme, which is commercial airlines and commercial aviation, which is heavily regulated, as you know. And in between, you might have a regulation by an FAA recognized third body organization. In this case, the example is the United States hang glider and Parasail or Paraglider Association. They have their own SOPs, their own processes that they publish internally to those who are involved in that particular activity. And that's a real light type of not so much regulation as an adaptation or an endorsement of a particular SOP. You get to the self-declarations for the FAA recognized consensus standards, which is where we are with UASs. The ASTM committee F37 is also involved in aviation. F38 is the one that deals with UAS. So F38, what's that mean? I'm going to talk about the vision, the mission, and the structure of F38 and how it works. The focus on small UAS, a little bit about the history of why we are where we are, and then the harmonizing of the standards going forward. The vision is to provide routine, safe UAS operations in civil airspace through standardization processes. And standards could mean guidance, could mean specifications, could mean recommended best practices. There's a variety of levels of standardization. The mission is to produce a practical, consensus-based standard that facilitates UAS operations at an acceptable level of safety and acceptable to the FAA and, more important, to society. What is society willing to accept as a level of risk for the introduction of this technology into the national airspace? It's a big mission, and it's not the easiest thing to achieve because we don't really know what it means in some cases. It can include design, manufacturing, maintenance, operations of unmanned systems, training and qualifications of personnel. We support industry, academia, government organizations, and other regulatory bodies. So the structure of F38 as it is right now, and this is kind of an evolving process because some of these subcommittees have been moved around within the organization, but F3801 is the airworthiness group. The chair of that group is A.J. Segal from the WILD group. They're dealing with products such as hardware and software, safe designs, construction, tests, and modification and inspection of individual components or parts of the system. 3802 is Mark Blanks is the lead on that. He's at Virginia Tech. They're more oriented towards procedures, operational performance-based standards. Safe deployment is really what they should say instead of employment of the system within the aviation community. And then 3803 is led by Scott Strimple. Scott is an airline pilot. He's a captain, A320 captain for United Airlines. Also owns a drone business on the side, so he's got feet in both communities. We've been teaching him a lot over the last few days over the unknown plastic bag that struck an A320. You need to certify plastic bags in the national airspace. And Scott's take on that was it was just a little bit of pilot hysteria that resulted in that report. That's crew-oriented, safe practices by individuals responsible for employing or for operating the system. The history of how we got involved with this small UAS effort, there was an ARC that Bruce and I participated. Actually, Bruce Charbert was the co-chair along with Ted Werbanowski from AeroVironment at the time. The FAA chartered this rulemaking committee in April 2008. The idea was to produce a regulatory system or body that would deal with small unmanned aircraft, meaning 55 pounds and less, operation within visual line of sight, daytime operations. And ASTM as an organization was invited to participate in the ARC deliberations. There was about, Bruce, 20 or 25 of us that were on the ARC, something in that range, something like that. Again, a broad spectrum of representatives from industry, academia, government. In April, about a year later, we issued our recommendations to the FAA. It's actually an 11-month plus process. We delivered our product on the day that it was due. In September of that same year, before taking any action at all on the recommendations, the FAA sent out a request to the Standards Development UAS Regulations, or Standards, excuse me. So in April 2010, the FAA and ASTM signed a memorandum of understanding, putting basically ASTM in a responsible position to develop these underlying standards that were going to support the Part 107 rule that's still pending at this point. And it was our understanding, I think, as we went down that path and that process, was that we would be supporting the new rule. We would have some input as to what that rule was going to state, although they couldn't share with us the exact language of it because it's still in the process. But we had a fundamental structure of how we were going to approach the standards making process. So from April 2010 through January 2015, ASTM began developing and finished and published a number of small UAS rules, or standards, in support of the anticipated UAS rule. Those standards included design, construction, and testing, subgroups design of the command and control subsystem. And these numbers you see to the right, the F2910 or F3005, are the work products that came out of those particular subcommittees. Production acceptance, quality assurance, maintenance and continued airworthiness and aircraft flight manual, which is basically a training manual. Those products were all completed. They went through a ballot process, and that's the way ASTM works, is the committees produce the document in response to the charge. It goes out to the main committee, and then it's voted on through a balloting process. It's consensus-based, so anybody who is an ASTM member and is a member of the F38 committee gets an opportunity to review the recommended standard and vote on it. I'll come back to it in a minute, but I'm chair of one of the Operations Over People work group, and we're on our second ballot on the standard that we've been developing over the last 3 years. And when there's a negative vote from anyone, and a comment that goes along with the negatives, that just like in the rulemaking process, that vote and that negative comment has to be adjudicated. We have to sit down as a group, the ones that developed the standard itself, and address the concerns from the person who's given us the input. Either agree with it and say, yeah, you're right, we'll change the language if necessary, or there's really no impact on what we're trying to do, so no change is recommended, or we could reject it and say, yeah, we understand what you're saying, but this is why we don't think we need to make a change, and then that language will stay in the document. So in February of last year, the FAA issues its NPRM on Part 107, and we all had anticipated that all the work that has gone into developing standards to support the rule would be in some way acknowledged or validated by the FAA in the actual rule itself. Well, they published the rule, and there was no statement in the rule about consensus standards at all. And it was as if all the work that had gone in the previous 5 years just went out the window. And we were assured by the FAA leadership that no, that's not the case, and there's a reason why we excluded it from the rule, but we can't tell you what that reason is because it's an ex parte rule, because the rule is still in development. And to this day, I don't know what the rule was, or the reason was. Maybe some FAA people in the room might know, but I don't know what it was. So there was a lot of consternation and a lot of conversation within ASTM as to what do we do with this. We've had hundreds, if not thousands of hours of voluntary work with people that really cared about what we were doing, about the outcome. And we don't know whether the FAA is going to even pay any attention to what we come up with. But there's nothing else out there. There's no other industry consensus standard that would define the best practices or the guidance within these particular categories. 2 minutes, okay, I'll get right through it. So we don't know what the final rule is going to be. It's supposedly going to be out here this next month or the month after that. Perhaps we'll circle back and have an opportunity to look back at our standards that have already gone through the balloting process. Some of them are being looked at again because as the standards were being developed, the focus was on fixed wing UASs, and then the Cambrian explosion revolution of quadcopters and VTOLs came along in the middle of this process. So we've had to go back and look at some of those early standards to revise them to accommodate the new technology. Other standards in development are operations over people, the most controversial one right now probably. Extended and beyond visual line of sight operations, it's in the ballot. They're on their second ballot. We're on the second ballot on operations over people. Operational risk assessment, also in ballot. adaptive algorithms, software dependability, and you can see the list here. These are standards that have been developed that are also in the balloting voting process, and some we're going to have to go back and look at again. I can say we've been involved in the operations over people standard for 3 years now, which has been a frustrating process because we've had our terms of reference redefined for us 3 times along the way. That comes from the FAA. So as the rules change, we have to go back and start over again with some of the deliberations. I know I'm almost done here. So, bottom line is the ASTM is seeking more participation, more cooperation, I suppose, from the community. If you want to be engaged, if you want to make a difference in creating performance-based standards and risk-based standards, get involved with ASTM because you're actually going to be in a position of, if not making policy, certainly producing standards that will offer a means of compliance to whatever the rule is going to be when it's finally published. It's a really important process. There are other organizations that are doing similar work. Hopefully it's not going to be overlapped with what we're doing. That's RTCA. So. Those are the 2 contacts. Paul Delapovitz is the membership secretary. Ted Werbanowski is the chairman of F38. Ted's in semi-retirement. He acts like he's retired, but he's working full-time on stuff like this. Thank you.
Thank you.